everyone, you are listening to Kids Wave Radio. My name's Shiloh McMillan, and today I'm excited to be joined by Dr Shanté Holley. She's a life coach, educator and writer who works with families and communities on wellbeing in today's busy world. She's also very passionate about inspiring people to read more. We're going to talk about why reading still matters for children and parents and how it fits into everyday life.
Kids Wave Radio, let your mind be free. Explore, learn and share in harmony. Email us your thoughts, join the band. Kids Wave Radio at protonmail.com, take a stand.
Welcome, Dr Shanté. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's great having you on the show. To start off, could you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a bit about what you do?
Oh, I feel like Jay-Z. Allow me to reintroduce myself. So, my name is Dr. Shanté Holley. I am a college professor by day, but outside of the college, where I teach English and writing, I am also a mental health coach that is very passionate about helping people heal from trauma and finding accessible ways to do that, one of which is reading. So this is like right in alignment with your show today. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Now, today we are going to be discussing about reading, first of all, because reading levels have been falling in recent years, which is why here in the UK we've launched 2026 as the National Year of Reading. So I'd like to ask you why you think reading needs more attention right now.
Reading needs more attention because of the exact word that you said, attention. So one of the things that people didn't realize when we started getting greater access to cell phones and to tablets is that when you are reading from a screen, it changes the way that your brain processes information. And so when you are reading with a book or reading a magazine or reading someone's story, your brain goes into a deep processing state. It starts to make meaning, and your brain goes into what is called a restful state. And so your restful state means that you are focused and you are locked in. But when you're reading from a screen, you are scanning and you are like, next, 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 next. And your brain is almost like consistently like switching attention from one thing to the next thing, from one thing to the next thing. And as a result, what happened is it got harder and harder for people to just sit down and read a book. It got harder for people to sit down and just be still. It got harder and harder for people to just be content without some form of entertainment or engagement because our brain is looking for a hit of something called dopamine. And dopamine is the way that your brain rewards itself. Like, oh, we're happy, we're surprised, we're excited. And so because they were used to that constant stimulation from the screen, it got harder and harder for students to sit down in class and focus. It got harder and harder for people to have conversations across from one another at a table. And next thing you know, everybody's looking down at a screen instead of being focused on the person that's in front of them.
100% yes. I've seen, like, for example, you're at a cafe and you see a group of people, they're sitting down, they're all together, and they probably come from college or uni or somewhere. They've all got backpacks and they're not talking, they're just looking straight down at their phone. They've got one phone in one hand and they're eating whatever they have in the other. So it's kind of like they're just glued to their phones practically.
Glued to their phones. And one of the things that has happened is exactly what you talked about. Not only are people finding it harder and harder to just kind of sit down and focused and be content and still, people are also losing their social skills. And so people are developing their impressions about life. People are getting their impressions about relationships and friendships from a screen instead of actually having in like real life experiences with other people. And so instead of forming those impressions from conversations that you've had or difficulties that you've overcome or conflicts that you've resolved, you are forming your impressions of the world through a screen, and you are losing the art of actually sitting down and having conversation.
100%. And I've even heard now that movie writers, script writers are having to add extra detail to kind of explain what's going on in each scene as people who are watching them have the TV on, but they're constantly just scrolling with their phone, so they're not actually concentrating on it.
That's true. I think Matt Damon recently said that Netflix, the scripting is very different because people will make that joke. They're like, have you ever watched something and said, oh, I missed that part? And so they rewound it and then missed the exact same part because they went right back to their phones. And so it's like, even when you are trying to watch a movie, that ability to have focused attention is getting more and more difficult for people. And so as a result, Hollywood has shifted to keep replaying the plot, and it's like, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And once upon a time they didn't have to do that.
Definitely 100%. Now, why is reading for enjoyment so important for children? Not just for schoolwork, but kind of for everyday life, like relaxing, winding down in the evenings and things like that.
So reading is abundantly beneficial for your mental health. And I don't know that a lot of people know that. So there are two researchers out of Princeton and out of Canada, and they did a study about 12, 13 years ago that they were pushing back on this idea that, oh, reading's just a bit of fun, it's just entertainment. They're like, no, their study showed that reading actually reduces stress. And so all of us have an abundance of hormones, and the stress hormone is called cortisol. And when cortisol is high, then that's where you start to have negative physical side effects. But reading, just in as little as 6 minutes, can reduce your cortisol levels by 68%. Reading is also a way to learn emotional regulation. And so there's a researcher, his name is Jonathan Haidt, and he talks about the difference between good screen time and bad screen time, right? And good screen time, when you're watching a story or a movie or reading a book in particular, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Like you are following this narration. But when you're on a screen, there is no end. You can literally wake up and start scrolling on your phone, and you could be there till you go to bed that night. Like there is no, it's this constant bombardment of stimulation, and there's not a real opportunity to process it. And so not only is reading beneficial for your mental health, but it also teaches you emotional regulation. It shows you that other people are dealing with the same emotions that you have, and it's giving you an opportunity to process those feelings in a safe space, as opposed to kind of lashing out in inappropriate settings and circumstances.
Absolutely, and that's why I did actually. Jonathan Haidt was interviewed. We have a in England we have a talk radio station. He was interviewed as they had an online, I think it was online safety day or something about that, and he said he gave some tips on how to stay safe online, especially for children and things like that. So, and he's written quite a few good books as well, like The Anxious Generation. So his mindset is quite unique, and I really agree with the things he says.
Yeah, I love his work. And that's another, I love the fact that he's amplifying how being socialized and growing up kind of like learning your social skills through a screen is creating anxiety. It creates depression. It compounds things like comparison, and reading is a really healthy and accessible alternative to that, especially because of the fact that you can go to your library. You can go to your local library. You don't even have to buy the books. You can actually just borrow the books. And they also have access to, in the States, we have something called Libby, where it's basically a way to borrow ebooks. And so you can, if you have like a Kindle or some sort of e-reader, you don't even have to buy the ebook. You can borrow them through your local library and have immediate free access.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't think we have anything like that. I think you just have to buy the ebooks. But unfortunately, here where I'm based, here in Birmingham, we have closed most of our libraries, so we've only got a few now. Two in the area of the station have closed down already, and so we've got a big main library, but they haven't got many books that would kind of indulge a reader.
That breaks my heart. That's like, that would be one of those things where if I had like all the time and all the money in the world, I would definitely like be leading the charge to reinvigorate that community because reading has really kind of taken off in the States. It's had a reemergence because people are tired of something called brain rot. And it's kind of that point where your brain is getting really static. The dopamine hit that you used to get, it doesn't hit the same anymore. And because there is so much troubling news, people are looking for places where they can be where they're not being hit with bad news or something controversial or something that's upsetting. And so a lot of people have turned to books. And so even though TikTok is in a lot of peril right now in the States, but Book Talk is a very popular community where people are sharing their book reviews and really learning to fall back in love with reading in a way to stimulate their brains in ways that screens just can't do that.
Yes, you've raised a very good point there, because now children are spending much more times on phones and tablets than they actually read books. So do you think that these screens are affecting how often the children read?
Absolutely. So let me be fair. Some people, the way their brains are set up, it's just very difficult for them to sit and focus. And so sometimes reading a physical, actual book is a challenge, but maybe an audiobook is a better alternative for them. For some of them, they actually like having an e-reader where they can kind of like push buttons and use their thumbs. And so that might be a possibility for them. But also, too, one of the things that we used to do here that was really popular for a long time back when I was in school, good Lord, back when I was your age, is something called sustained silent reading. And basically every day for 10 to 15 minutes, we had time, the whole school, to read something that we wanted to read. And the beauty of this is that in school, you don't get a whole lot of choices. These are your assignments, this is the homework, this is the book, and you have to do it. But sustained silent reading gave something that we didn't have a whole lot of, which was choice. And people loved being able to choose something that really interested them. And so one of the reasons why the kids are spending so much time on screens is because they're like, oh, I know I can find something that interests me. And I think that we need to get back to a place of putting things in front of children and give them an opportunity to find interest, give them an opportunity to discover things that can provide just as much satisfaction as they find on the screen.
Yes, indeed, that's what we need to do. We need to find something that can kind of replace that with reading. So you mentioned some very good points there. There's quite a lot of discussion now about the quick digital content like 30-second clips on, for example, TikTok or YouTube Shorts, and how it might affect attention spans. So what impact, if any, do you think this is having on children?
So one of the things that it is creating is this idea that there's always going to be another stimulus, that there's always going to be something else to, catch attention. And what that's doing is it doesn't give children a lot of time to really process. So processing takes time. So sometimes you may have seen some of your peers or your classmates do something that was inappropriate or just reckless. And then when you ask them, why did you do that? They don't have an answer. They're like, I don't know. They didn't think it through because they haven't built that muscle of sometimes you have to take the time to think about how is this going to make somebody else feel? What is this going to say about me? Is this the way that I want my teachers to look at me? Is this the kind of person that I want to be? And when your brain has been tuned for 30-second clips, 30-second clips, and it's switch, 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 that doesn't leave a whole lot of time to develop the muscle of critical thinking and processing, which is something that reading absolutely provides.
Well, that's great to hear that reading is actually doing some great benefits to us. And actually, I happen to be homeschooled, so I have loads of time to just sit back and read with my favorite books. So currently, actually, books that were written, I believe it was the 1940s, and it's a series called Tom Swift, and it's kind of like a science fiction adventure. So he's a great inventor, and his father was a great inventor, so he invents different things. He's only young, he's about 18, and he's inventing many things. He's going off to the moon and different things like that. So these books are really captivating, so I don't feel any need to go on the screen. So I only really use screens for homework and things like that. But unfortunately, there are friends of mine who, when I did attend school for 6 weeks for year 7, and there were times when a particular one of my friends didn't do his homework, he got in detention, and then one of my other friends would say, oh, I saw you online on this game from 4, for example, till 8.
Oh boy.
So
that's a long time.
That might explain the missing homework.
That might explain the missing homework. And you've picked a really good series. Tom Swift is good reading. And that's the thing, right? Sometimes I think that students or kids think that books don't have anything modern to offer. Like, oh, that's just old. Like that's old school and it's not now. And I'm like, no, what books and stories do is they tell you something about the human condition. They tell you what it is to be afraid. They tell you what it is to be overwhelmed. They tell you what it is to overcome struggles. It tells you how to deal with heartbreak. And like all of those things are part of the human experience. And the beauty of a story is to be able to see yourself in it and say, wow, this is how I would feel it. This is how I would handle that situation. And sometimes, especially now with this growing technology of AI is so, it makes attempts to be so polished and so perfect to the point where it's not even real, to the point where it literally is not even human. And so the beauty of books, especially like the ones you're reading, is that it taps you back into the possibilities of expanding what the human condition can feel like as a kid.
100%, I definitely agree with that. And also, there are children who think that, we don't like reading, and we're bored after the first page and things like that. So what would you say to a child who says that they get bored after, for example, the first page of a book?
What do you young people say today? What do they say in the States? Let her cook. Okay. Like sometimes you have to let it cook. Sometimes you have to let the stove warm up. Okay. Sometimes you have to give it an opportunity. One of my favorite sayings for motivation is every master was once a disaster. And so every student who is a great athlete or an excellent writer or really good at swimming or really good at lacrosse or really good at football or what have you, when they started, 9 times out of 10, they weren't very good. Okay. Like they had to give it time. They had to keep coming back. And you can also push back for those of them who are playing video games. It's like the first time you played this video game, you lost. The second time you played this video game, you lost, but you kept coming back to it. And so reading is the same way. It's like, yeah, it may not get you initially, it may not grab you right at the beginning, but if you give it an opportunity and keep coming back to it the way that you keep coming back to the video game, then you'll have an even greater reward because now you're invested in the story and it takes you on a journey.
That's some great advice. So I hope children who are out there and who say these kind of things have taken inspiration from your wise words. Now, is this drop in reading something families should be very concerned about, or is it something that can still be flipped over?
I do think it's something that families should be concerned about. And for any parents who might be listening, I think it's important not to just tell your kids to read. I think it's important to model the behavior that you want to see. So it's not just go read a book. That's a very different dynamic than let's read a book, because books are also a way to build community and connection. In the United States and in many parts of the world, we have what is considered a loneliness epidemic, meaning people feel like they don't have connections to friends and they feel like they don't have connections to family. And the screen is almost like their lifeline. It's like they're looking for some form of just connection, conversation, or what have you, through a screen. when you can get the exact same connection and build community through books. And so things like book clubs and conversations around some of the themes and books. Like, I don't know if you guys have Love Island in the UK, but in the US it's very popular. It's this like romance dating show. And I'm like, okay, in the same way that you're talking about like Love Island, every last one of those themes you can find in a book and have just as much robust conversation from there. And so as parents, it's not just about making sure your kids are reading, but I think it's about how do you incorporate reading into your household so that it is a family activity instead of something just the kids are doing.
And those are great words of advice there. So I hope that parents have found that very helpful. And it's actually quite concerning that reading levels have dropped so low, because the National Literacy Trust have released stats for 2025, and they said that only 1 in 5 children enjoy, or I think it was 1 in 5 children enjoy reading for pleasure, and that's 18% altogether love reading for pleasure. The rest are forced. So it's quite tragic to see these sad results. And what do you think could happen if children grow up reading much less than the previous generations?
So I recently posted a video on social media because on the 19th of January, we honored the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the efforts that he facilitated to try to achieve a sense of equality and equity in the United States. But when he was a student at Morehouse University, something that he wrote a paper on the purpose of education. He said the purpose of education is not information. The purpose of education is to learn discernment, to learn how to sift evidence, to learn how to think critically, to learn how to be able to look at something and separate lies from fiction and fake from reality. And when you don't read, when reading levels are that low, that is also what is in jeopardy. It is important in this day and age, especially in this age of technology and AI, for students and children to be able to know this is real and this is not real. This makes sense and this does not have enough evidence to support it. And so it's not just about what you do for fun, but it's also how you show up in the world as a thinker.
Definitely. I highly agree with Martin Luther King. He's very good when he comes to talking about things like that and empowering people, because last week it was Martin Luther King Day, and you're right, he was known for the powerful speeches and words. Do you see a link between children who read and children who feel more confident speaking up in class and sharing opinions, like Dr. Martin Luther King?
Oh, absolutely, because reading also builds confidence. So, one of the things that I can tell you as a professor, as somebody who has assigned many readings over the years, when I'm ready to talk about it in class, I can always tell the students who haven't read. I can always tell because it gets real quiet. I ask a question and then it's like crickets start chirping and it's like, people start looking to the left, they start looking down at the table, playing with the phone, and I'm like, okay. But when you've read, you've formed an opinion. When you've read, you've had a reaction. When you've read, you've made a connection. And that is one of the beautiful things. And it changes the quality of your experience as a student, because there's a difference between a college degree and a college education. The degree is just the paper, it's just the credential, but the education is the learning. And so when you engage as a learner, it completely changes and shapes your experience with showing up in class and being a more confident student.
And that's I think I've been in fact my brother, when he was this age, he was doing the exact same show as I was doing, and we've all grown up without smartphones in our life, so I think that's enabled us to have more public speaking skills and able to form things together. So I think it's mainly the reading that's helped as well. Now about Dr. Martin Luther King. How important do you think reading was in helping him to communicate his ideas, since we're on the same topic of children who feel more confident speaking up in class and sharing opinions?
So he he was very much ahead of his time. And so one of the pieces of reading that I have students that I assign to my students is a letter that he wrote from Birmingham jail. Um, and in that letter, he makes so many references to Socrates, to Thomas Aquinas, to he makes biblical references, he makes philosophical references. Like you can tell that he is a well-read, like in scholar, almost because of his ability to use reading and his learning to substantiate his arguments. And so it's not just reading to get grades, but it's also reading in terms of learning how to structure, how to communicate with other people. And that's one of the benefits of reading that Dr. Martin Luther King had really mastered is using what he read to be able to communicate with others.
So it seems like he was quite ahead of his time then. So he was using many different things. So it was quite showing that he was quite ahead of his time. And as well, Dr. Martin Luther King believed very strongly in education as a way to change lives. And you did mention about AI as well. So with AI now part of everyday life, do you think it's changing how children learn and think?
I do think it's changing the way that children learn and think. And it's also changing the way that adults process information. And so here's the thing, adult brains are considered developed by the age of 24 or 25. And if someone who is fully developed with those cognitive faculties can't distinguish between what's real and what's not real, um, then children who don't have that level of maturity or development are really going to struggle. Not to mention the fact, just in terms of like using AI. So one of the things that we're dealing with at the college level is students who use AI to try to write their essays and try to write their paper. And this is exactly what I mean when I say there's a difference between having a college degree versus having a college education. It's like imagine paying all that money because in the United States you got to pay for college. Okay, so imagine paying all of that money for college or paying all that money for a degree and you still don't know how to write. Imagine paying all that money for college and you still don't know how to navigate conflict or be able to argue your point or learn how to support um, your position. And so it's like you've spent all of that money, but what has changed? Okay, there's a difference between earning a degree and buying a degree. And so I think that when you use AI or you rely on AI to just reach an outcome instead of looking that you might be robbing yourself of an opportunity to learn, I think that's something that people need to take a much closer look at.
Yes, you've basically stolen your own skill, basically, because you've just relied on AI to write you some marvelous essay and just managed to achieve practically a piece of paper that just says you know how to do it without actually taking away the skill.
You've cheapened the degree.
Basically, yes. If Martin Luther King was speaking to children today, what do you say?
Oh boy. I think that he would instill a sense of confidence. I think that sometimes we think that because I'm just one person or because I'm so young that you don't have a voice or that you can't make a difference. And that's not true. I mean, look at what you're doing. Like, I am so impressed. I know college students that are not able to do what you are doing right now. I'm like, okay, Shiloh, I see you. It is really incredible to be able to have that skill set. And I think that Martin Luther King would instill a sense of confidence that you can be the change, that you do have a voice, that you can shape the world. And one of the ways to do that is to invest in yourself, to invest in the process of becoming your best and highest self. And reading is one of the best and most accessible ways to do that.
Yes, it is. Reading is one of the best ways to kind of achieve just that. Reading often means thinking for yourself rather than being told what to think. Why is this important for children as they grow up?
It's important because sometimes you have to question authority. As a matter of fact, a lot of times you have to question authority because sometimes people in authority have an agenda or have policies or have ideologies that are completely out of alignment with what you believe. And you need to recognize what is your position. You need to recognize what is your position and where do you stand and how are you contributing to the community and in the ways that are impactful to your peers and your environment. And so it's one of those things where being able to speak up and challenge authority, because here's the thing, you're not always going to be a student. You're not always going to be a kid in class. You're not always going to be homeschooled and in your parents' house. At some point, you're going to be a voter. At some point, you're going to be in the workplace and you have to learn how to shape your perspective, and sometimes challenge authority and sometimes stick up for people who don't have a voice to stick up for themselves.
100% there. So you're going to have to experience all sorts of things when you're older. So it's best to kind of get an experience, and reading books gives you that experience as well. I think that reading is often a quiet individual activity, it's just mainly you and a book. So how does something like that help children with the real life communication and connecting with others? Because they do, some people do say, some children, oh, it's irrelevant, it's not going to help me reading, it's a waste of time. So how does it help you connect and communicate with others, even though it's a quiet activity?
One of the ways that it helps you connect with others is that it develops the ability to see someone else's perspective. One of the greatest ways to build the capacity for empathy, which is being able to connect to someone where they are, is through reading. It is seeing this other perspective, because a lot of the conflict that you see in the world today, a lot of the conflict that you see online and people fighting with one another and what have you, is because their argument is, well, I didn't experience that, so it can't be true. Well, just because that hasn't been your experience doesn't mean that that hasn't been somebody else's experience. And can you learn how to connect with them in a way that validates that experience, even though it hasn't been yours? You know, the example that I use all the time is that if you've ever flown a plane, um, you can fly first class, you know, which means you're sitting in the front of the plane, you're eating all the fancy snacks, you know, you have more room. But if you're flying in the back of the plane, that is a very different experience. Okay. And so just because um you got fancy snacks and bubbly drinks doesn't mean that everybody had that. And so books is one of the ways where you start to learn to see that other people have perspectives and experiences that may not be your own, and you build a well of compassion and empathy in that regard.
Definitely, it opens up other opinions and things like that. It opens your eyes to kind of a different sense of the world and things like that. Now, changing topic a little to outdoor play, how important is it, and experiencing nature or just being active for a children's well-being, and how does it tie in well with books?
Oh, it's good for adult well-being too. One of the things that people don't realize is that nature has something called a circadian rhythm. And so this is why people who struggle with seasonal depression feel better in the sun. This is why people who are trying to regulate their emotions feel better when they're outside in fresh air, because nature has a ton of mental health benefits, because it not only improves your mood, but it also allows you to the space to think and to process and to breathe and to kind of step away from stressful situations. And one of the things that adults tend to get away from is play. And it's like you go to work and then you're tired from work, and then you might have a family, and so you put dinner on the table, and then you get everybody off to bed, and now you are balled up on the couch scrolling through TikToks, or scrolling through YouTube. And it's like, yeah, but what do you do for fun? Like, do you do puzzles? Do you um host picnics? Do you play chess in the park? Do you go roller skating? And a lot of adults have forgotten how to do that. And unfortunately, because of things like video games and telephones and tablets, a lot of kids are losing that ability too. But play is one of the ways that we actually improve our mental health, both as a child and as an adult.
Yes, it does. And also, I did in the United Kingdom, we have a an organisation called Play England. So I did manage to interview them, and they said it's very important for the children's mental health. But unfortunately, the UK laws are kind of a bit restricting. So there's no ball games. There are hardly any parks that have usable facilities, as in they've just been vandalised, things like that. So unfortunately, we don't have many areas for children to play. So that's why the next resort is just to on the tablet or on the screens.
That is really an important piece that gets lost in a lot of these conversations. And so there's something called a third space. And a third space means it's not work, it's not school, but it's a third space where people can just come together and connect and just be. And so that might be parks, that might be libraries, that might be museums. And when you lose third spaces, what you are doing is you're forcing people to pay to connect. It's like, oh, yes, I can meet you for a coffee, but I have to pay for the coffee because I can't just sit there, you know? And so being able to have third spaces, like another place to go, to build community is really important to cultivate that aspect of play.
Yes, it is. That's a very good point. Having that third space is very essential. Now, there are parents out there who are listening to this show and they want stronger connections at home, but they don't really know where to start. So, is it possible to have some advice on that, please?
So I think that one of the first things that you can do is change change the mandate to an invitation, because there's a difference in being told that you have to do something or being forced to do something versus being invited to do it. So there's a difference in you're going to sit down and you're going to watch this movie and you're going to write a report about it, as opposed to let's go to the movies. Like, let's, when it becomes a we activity, it's an important way to build connection. Or when children are very small and they're all about connection before the tablets, the screens, and all of that. And you say something like, "You want me to read you a book?" They're all about it because they know they get to curl up, they know they get to be in your lap, they know they get to see some good pictures, they know they get to engage in something exciting. And so the parents, you have to put the phone down too. Okay, like you have to put the tablet down too. You have to model the change. There is this content creator, and she says what she does in her household is like bedtime is at 9 o'clock, but all of her kids have the option to stay up an extra hour if they read, if they use that hour to read. And so it's like, you don't have to do it. You can go to bed at your regular bedtime, but if you want to stay up the extra hour, you have to do the reading. And at first it was just one kid, and then it was two kids, and now all three of her kids and the whole family is sitting down at the end of the night with that extra hour of reading and connection. And because they're doing it together, it creates a much more lasting bond.
Yes, it does. That's a great idea. I've never thought of that. So I hope that managed to inspire many parents out there. But unfortunately, parents are also faced with the issue that your child's been reading and then suddenly the phone is appears. Then they've lost the interest. So what's a good way to rediscover reading after they've been presented with a phone or tablet?
So there ironically, I've seen quite a few startups. One of them is called Tin Can Call. Another one is called Physical Phone. And basically, what it is that people are now buying physical phones for their children. So once upon a time, before we had cell phones, we had landlines. And these new versions of that are basically you buy a physical phone. It doesn't have any screens, it doesn't have any apps. It's just like an old school phone, and it connects to the Bluetooth or it connects to the Wi-Fi, and calls are unlimited. Look at that. See, calls are unlimited and free from physical phone to physical phone. And what it's teaching children to do is relearning how to have conversations without the distraction of a screen, and it still gives them the opportunity to connect to their friends. And so parents, one of the things that you can do is switch out the smartphone for a physical phone, just to reintroduce that idea of being connected in conversation, and then also modeling that behavior in front of your kids.
That's a wonderful way of thinking. I've heard that some people have started buying back their old fashioned landlines. I believe in the UK we are starting to go out of actual plugs and it's connected to the internet. So we, instead of the wall and the socket, it's now being connected to the internet instead. So landlines are changing here in the UK. So I think not many people have them at home because they come with an added cost as well. So, I think only main corporate businesses like for example we at the radio station, we have to have a proper analog phone so we can dial certain things and do certain things for the radio. So I think that's a manageable option. I've even heard that some of these landline phones you can put a SIM card into it and you can use it to call people and things like that. So it still has no screen, but you can just select who you want to call from the saved SIM card.
You can, and analog is making a huge comeback. People are so starved for real connection that analog is making its way back. And so, for example, people are moving away from taking pictures with their cell phones, and people are going back to film cameras. And it's becoming popular to want to develop film and disposable cameras to be able to develop film all over again. People are walking away from streaming services because they're tired of paying $10, $15, or pounds every month to stream from Spotify or from Apple Music, and they want actual vinyl and have that listening experience, and they want to retrain their brain, because if you listen to a vinyl or a CD, which is digital but it's still a physical media, you don't get to like flip from song to song to song to song. From, no, I'm listening to Olivia Dean, now I'm listening to Wu-Tang Clan, now I'm listening to Kendrick Lamar. No, when you're listening to the CD, you're listening to the whole body of work. You're listening to the artist. And so it trains your brain to stay with something, to process the full complement of the artist's work, instead of just switching from one song to a next like you would on a Spotify playlist. Analog is making a huge comeback.
Indeed it is, and I'm glad as well. But unfortunately now, I don't know about the USA, but in now modern cars, there's no CD player slots. It's a big issue.
Yeah, I literally just bought a CD player. Like I I went to my parents' house to see if I could find my old school CD player. I couldn't find it and I had to buy one. And I kid you not, Shiloh, when I put the first CD in, I literally felt my nervous system start to regulate itself. I literally felt any nerves, any anxiety just really start to mellow itself out, because it had been so long. I have not sat down with CDs really since just after college. And so to be able to re-engage that nostalgia, that feeling, that physical medium was so wonderful. And so yes, you can't put it in the car, but you can you can go on resellers. We have things like eBay, and possibly find one for a reduced cost and bring back that same nostalgic and recapture that feeling of being able to listen to physical music.
Oh, well, that's a great way, actually. I didn't think of CD players. So they're trying to phase away. So even with changing copper landlines to now internet landlines, they're trying to slowly but surely phase it away. But then they also have to have a practical working solution for businesses. So that's why they had to get this internet. But unfortunately, I don't think CD players are coming back in cars. It can be as a custom modification, but they now expect you to have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay built into your infotainment system. So it's they're kind of trying to phase away all the analog memorabilia. How can parents now support reading without turning it into like a pressure or chore? Because some parents say they kind of have to force their kids to read because they don't want to.
So one of my favorite things to do is to turn an activity into an experience. So reading can be an activity, but it can also be an experience. And so there are a lot of people who, instead of just grabbing a book and plunking down on the couch, or, sitting in a chair, a lot of them will, hold on, let me get my snacks. Hold on, let me get my special lamp. Okay, let me turn on my special music in the background, and they create a mood, they create a vibe, they create an experience. And so now, instead of just I'm sitting here with this book, which feels like a chore and an activity, now I'm curating vibes. Now, it's more fun to read the book because I'm reading it in a setting that brings me joy and happiness. And so, one of the things that parents can do, instead of just like sit over there and do your mandatory reading, is what is a way that we can make this an experience? And so, it's like, okay, get your little fruit snacks, get your little crunchy crackers, get your favorite, fizzy drink, whether that's juice or pop or what have you. And it's like, okay, now you're ready to read because you have some of these additional comforts that make it an experience instead of just an activity.
Definitely, that is a great way. Personally, I like to maybe have a few snacks handy, or maybe even a drink actually, which is quite handy for easing into the mood of reading. So it's quite a helpful tip there. Now, here is the main question. It's one question I always ask every single guest, and it's, what was your favorite book as a child?
Oh gosh, there are so many. There are so many. So I would probably say, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. And Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary in the 80s, because I grew up in the 80s. I know I don't look it, but I in the 80s. What I loved about their writing is that they really had their finger on the pulse of teenage angst and preteen angst. They could tap directly into those feelings of what it felt like to be 11 or 12 or 13, and to want to grow up faster than what life would allow, or what it meant to grow up too fast and dealing with the consequences on the back end of that. And so Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret was just like the quintessential young girl's guide to what it meant to be an adolescent teenager with new friends, moving to a new place and feeling awkward and not confident in yourself, and what it meant to compare yourself to other people. And at the end, just learning to love yourself exactly as you are. That probably was my favorite book. That was one of the books where I was like, wow, she gets it. And then I would probably say a close runner up would be Little House in the Big Woods, because there was something just very simplistic. No phones, no screens. Kids didn't get 75 gifts for Christmas. They got one doll and they loved it. They made candy from maple syrup and snow. Like it was just a much simpler time. And sometimes when life feels really complicated, it's great to have books that just can speak to that. It doesn't take all that to have connection. It doesn't take all that to have joy.
Now, those are, I've had heard of Beverly Cleary. When I was younger, I did read the series Henry Huggins, and that was quite a good. I
Yes,
enjoyed
very
that
good.
series, as well as I believe it was Ramona, I believe it was. So it was quite an
Ramona
enjoyable.
Quimby. Yes.
Yes, it was quite an enjoyable series, and I enjoyed it. But now, all good things come to an end, and sadly we are approaching the end of our interview. But finally, one last question before we go. If you could change one thing about how children experience education today, what would it be?
If I could change one thing about how children experience education today, it would probably be the classroom setup itself. So there is a room setup, a physical room setup that is called classroom style, which is basically all the desk in rows. And what this setup does is it means that the teacher is the authority, all eyes to the front, that the focus is to the front of the class. I would change the seating arrangement so that everybody learned in circles and small tables. So, because that means that you are a co-creator, that you are a contributor, that I want you to talk. I want you to share. I want you to engage. I want you to build community with your neighbor and learn together, rather than this all eyes forward in this way that if I see you talking or if I see you chewing gum, then you're in trouble. It's like it creates this very authoritative dynamic, which makes kids feel less important in the classroom and less a part of the curriculum, whereas opposed to learning in circles encourages dialogue and makes them feel like they're a part of it and that they can shape the learning experience instead of just being a passive recipient of it.
And that is a very good thing to change about education today. I'd like to thank Dr. Shanté for joining us on today's show. It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here. I would come back anytime. This was a great conversation.
Indeed it was. That's all from me today. I'll be back with another episode. Shiloh McMillan signing out.